predavanjem Aleksandre Jovićević. Aleksandra je študirala v Beogradu, predavala v Beogradu, trenutno deluje na univerzi v Rimu, ukvarja se z dramatiko, z gledališčem in naslov njenega predavanja je From Stage to Page, New Forms of Performance Text. Aleksandra, please.
Okay. Thank you, 𝘀𝗶𝗺𝗀𝗁𝗧, for inviting me and also for introducing me. That is very nice, giving me this opportunity to speak about something which has been for a long time one of the topics we would like to clarify. And I think I'm going to read my paper because then I'm much more concentrated than doing some improvisation. So we all agree that for centuries the theater was accused of being overtly logocentric, and for a long time the dramatic text or theater play was the primary producer or transmitter of meaning and represented the main source of understanding the performance. But performance and drama are completely two different phenomena, and their relationship to each other remain unresolved. According to Bernard Dort, the unification of text and stage never really took place, always remaining a relationship of oppression and compromise. The contemporary theater confirms that a harmonious relationship between them is completely impossible. The dramatic text is no longer seen as an authority that controls and governs the process of staging or as of central importance to the performance. It is defined as something that precedes the performance, a source of inspiration or something out of which the staging process emerges. But what if the text becomes or is seen as a final result of the performance? A posteriori, as the text of the performance, in which the space and the bodies of the actors have appeared in particular materiality in the performance and in a special relation to the written text. What can be decisive here could be a new way of thinking and writing for the and on the stage based on the performance itself. The role of the written text in the process of staging could be described as an appropriation and assimilation through the participating artist. This then becomes particularly true for the actors. During the rehearsals, the actors must internalize any kind of text and then externalize a new kind of text. This happens always regardless of whether the text is performed in full or with cuts and changes or interspersed with additional material. The actors must appropriate and assimilate the text or the text in such a way that something other than the written text is created. First the performance, and of course at the end the performance text. Therefore, we could conclude that there are four kinds of text at stake: the verbal text, the linguistic text, the text of the staging and mise en scène, and finally the performance text. This is not a new thing. I mean, many theoreticians, like not only Lehmann, but Schechner, Marco De Marinis, Patrice Pavis, they all noted that. But here, not only stage directions regarding the use of the space, the set costume and the sounds in the performance, but also the presence of the public, they all together create that which could be defined as a crystal image, which was developed by Gilles Deleuze in 2 volumes he wrote on cinema in 1986 and 1989. In this text, Deleuze examines the ways in which time discloses itself through the semiotic dimension of cinema. Subsequently, Deleuze identifies 3 distinctly different senses of cinematographic time. Time as the movement of image, the movement of time image, and third, the appearance of time itself. The main objective behind my examination is thus twofold. First, to demonstrate that theater can be approached as a special kind of semiotic phenomena, and second, on the strength of this hybrid method, to further our understanding of the materiality and completeness of the performance. Precisely because theater increasingly extends its borders with the help of visual and sound effects and with the combination of video and digital projections and live presence, it has to refer to the performance text as a quality that can reflect and testimony of the crystal image, like in the works of Wooster Group, 𝘂𝗃𝗃, Forced Entertainment, René Polish, Aleksandra Jovićević, Milo Rau, and 𝘀𝗶𝗺𝗺𝗁𝗍𝗺, just to name a few artists who are all writing new texts with their actors or companies while directing. Therefore, what we call a text of the performance becomes a final result and not a starting point. Furthermore, the relationship of the performance to the spectators, the temporal and spatial situation, and the place and function of the theatrical process within the social context, all of which constitute the performance text, will over-determine the other three levels of the text. While it is justified to dissect the density of the performance methodologically into levels of signification, it has to be remembered that the texture is not like a wall out of bricks, but like a fabric out of threads. Consequently, the significance of all individual elements ultimately depends on the way the whole is viewed, rather than constituting this overall effect as a sum of the individual parts. Hence, for contemporary theater, the written and/or verbal text that has been transferred to theater, as well as the text of the staging understood in the widest sense, including the performance, their paralinguistic additions, reductions or deformations of the linguistic material, costume, lighting, sound, space, peculiar temporality, are all brought into a new light into the performance text. And I here on purpose avoid the word post-dramatic, because it has been abused in certain sense, and I would rather speak about it as a contemporary theater, because all these practices are together. Even though post-dramatic can include all these practices together, but even if the structural transformation of the theatrical situation, of the role of the spectator in it, and the mode of its communicative process is not equally pronounced everywhere, this statement still holds true. The contemporary theater does not simply mean a new kind of text of staging, and even less a new type of the theater text, but rather a use of different signs in the theater that turn both of these levels of theater upside down through the structurally changed quality of the performance text. And according to 𝘂𝗃𝗧𝗏, who is unavoidable in all this, it becomes more presence than representation, more shared than communicated experience, more process than a product, more manifestation than signification, more energetic impulse than information. And then, according to Roland Barthes, every theater performance is an endless process of semiosis, because each sign on the stage is taking us to another sign, and different signs create a new one without an end. Thus, the whole performance is seen as a sort of text, because every structured combination of signs, regardless of what kind of signs they are, can be seen as a text. From a semiotic perspective, however, written text and text of the performance are different sign systems, and each of them has a specific characteristics and limitations which influence their means of expression. Therefore, a number of questions arise about the text function and role, and the textual knowledge is prerequisite in this context. Yet any kind of text is incomplete when it comes to the performance. It cannot control the process of staging, it can only refer to that which can be verbally expressed. It therefore seems more sensible to see the performance text as a document of the staging process, an interplay with other materials. As mentioned before, the space, the actors, the sound, music, all of which combined make up the performance. The performance text could be also defined as a piecing together of different elements, material and conceptual alike, that exist only during the performance, in the very act of performing, during an event, performance, or in representation that produce different performance texts, which Alain Badiou calls theater ideas. This also means that theater ideas could not be produced by any other instruments or at any other place, as well as that none of the elements by itself could produce theater ideas or even the text of the performance itself. Precisely, the theater ideas come forth only in the brief time of its performance, of its representation. Therefore, all performance texts could be called open texts of the performance, in the sense that they require the spectators to become active co-writers. Can we therefore define the performance text as a scenic écriture, collective writing, or hypertext, or stretch text, or even écriture corporelle? and how it can be translated from stage to page in order to be preserved for future studies. The presence of human and sometimes animal bodies, gestures, and voices also seizes the language material and rejects language's function of representation. And instead of a linguistic representation of facts, there is a position of tones, words, sentences, sounds that are hardly controlled by a meaning, but instead by a scenic composition, by a visual and not text-oriented dramaturgy. We can say that all this started from Brecht's input on epic theater. In his analysis of Brecht's epic theater, Walter Benjamin noted that the dialectical images are by no means solely linguistic images. The condition which epic theater reveals is the dialectic at the standstill. And this is a quote from Benjamin. Epic theater moves forward jerkily like the images of a film strip. Brecht, who aspired to change the world but managed only to change the theater, introduced a new way of writing that came closest to what we now define as a montage or collage of different texts or antilinear fragmentary dramaturgy, and most importantly, the presentation of the ways how the performer's body creates meaning through gestus, and finally, the meaning produced by the performance text. Brecht also re-examined the ontological status of live performance in his work by extensive use of model books. These books came closest to what we today define as an ideal text of the performance. However, at any attempt to be reproduced, they always differed from the original. They become different performances. And I don't know if you know this, but in socialist Yugoslavia, many directors use these model books from Brecht to do exactly the same performances, let's say Mother Courage or Caucasian Chalk Circle, but it came always. These were different performances, so it was impossible. Although this seemed to be like a final document, the performance text, it could not be repeated. And I hear this kind of writing remind me of so-called scenic essays, works that offer a public reflection on particular themes instead of a dramatic action that are symptomatic for the landscape of contemporary theater. And today we heard example of Didier Oribon. Okay, this is theoretical, philosophical, or theater aesthetic texts are pulled out of their familiar surrounding habitat. And, companies and directors use this situation to think aloud publicly or to make different theories heard. And in works that use theoretical text or political speeches, one can also see that the actors seem to be more absorbed in the debate about their subject and its representation than in the actual presentation of it. This is certainly true for the works of Wooster Group, Oliver Frljić, and especially René Polish, where, for example, one witnesses a public debate among the actors about their subject rather than its staging. For instance, seeking to demystify representational theater, René Polish argues that social acts should be criticized by means of relentlessly repeating them on stage. Precisely in Polish productions, actors approximate performance artists because of the liveness of their provocative presence, which comes forefront more so than presenting a character would do. The actors confront the audience, seeking to transform their ideas, texts into life, so that the audience may be entirely drawn into those texts, which are usually theoretical. For example, in his play Pablo in der Plus Filiale, Pablo at the Plus supermarket, which looked like a product of the aesthetic of coupons, cheap soap operas, various texts from weird between trash and theory, the internet and commercial advertising, an aesthetic based on 70s look, Polish used a selection of writings by a number of economic experts, claiming that their authors were often impressed by the way he presents them and by seeing in his plays human bodies and subjects that identify with their contents without reserve, presenting the problems in a direct and corporal manner. In this play, like in all other Polish plays, the theoretical language of economics is paradoxically close to a character soliloquies. In this process, as with all Polish plays, there was neither a story, nor a set of main characters, nor a possibility of identification. Using a technological and neoliberal jargon, the protagonists speak of their own existence as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Both in rehearsals and when it was first shown, the play accommodated no set characters, genders, or identities. In Polish plays, the actors are no mere interpreters of his ideas, but rather debate and interpret their own ideas. Therefore, in acting, they are all taking chance because they never know how the audience will understand their performance and how the latter will end. Polish performances deliberately seem unfinished. This principle of polyglossia proves to be omnipresent in contemporary theater. Theater asserts a polyglossia on several levels, playfully showing gaps, abruptions, and unsolved conflicts, even clumsiness and loss of control. Frequently, we are confronted with this kind of principle. For example, one asks, who is the author of the text of the performance? For example, Oliver Frljić always uses the theater as a performative tool to reach out to audience darkest taboos. When he is not deconstructing classical text, Frljić is presenting his own performance texts that are sometimes based on true facts and sometimes on invented narratives. Frljić prefers the original politics of performance art. No repetition, no rehearsing, and no recording. So the only trace of each performance is an experience shared between you as a performer and the audience. That was a quote from him. But what are these traces and how they can be acknowledged? The central goal of such reflection should be to analyze with precision the creation and meaning of the performance text as a new and unavoidable theater tool that enlarges the definition of contemporary theater. For example, one of Oliver Frljić's strategies includes constant and radical changes within the theater, entailing the permanent questioning and interrogation of existing power structures within the institution. Frljić explained, when I want to create a conflict with the audience, my dream is to have antagonism between every audience member. The goal is to divide them as much as possible and thus to reaffirm their uniqueness. The task is not to unite them, not to find a common denominator or a common system of values that we share. It is interesting to know that Frljić, like Polish, is never concerned with what can be defined as a success. On the contrary, most of his productions give the impression of being unfinished, a kind of misperformance, and a sort of bad amateur theater strongly influenced by performance art. The connoisseurs of performance art can recognize many citations from the works of 𝘂𝗶𝗺𝗫𝗁, Karoli Schneemann, Marina Abramović, Vito Acconci, Paul McCarthy, and etc. The audience has a similar reaction to these productions as it had to these performances. They are disgusted, they protest, or leave the theater, but they are never indifferent. In several interviews, Frljić stated that he was very skeptical towards the theater. For him, theater was a fake as medium, and that he felt embarrassed most of the time watching people on the stage. And when I started to think about the arts, or what and how could do things, performance art was my first choice because of at least two things. First, it was available. You didn't need anything. It was like conceptual art. You need your idea. You have yourself as a performer. You can perform whenever you want, etc. On the other hand, I really like the original politics of performance art. No repetition, no rehearsing, and no recording. So the only trace of each performance is an experience shared between you as a performer and the audience. This leads us back to Brecht, according to whom the most successful theater will be the one that enters into a risky association between artists and spectators. Its aim is to realize that their intellectual as well as emotional abilities looking for that which may be created in the new context of the performance. On many occasions, Brecht stressed that the audience is a collection of individuals capable of thinking and reasoning, of making judgments even in the theater. He treats them as individuals of mental and emotional maturity and believes it wishes to be so regarded. Viewed in this way, the text of the performance comes closest to what can be defined as its efficacy, which means that the real essence of the performance is communicated by its public impact and not by the text itself. Many of 𝘀𝗀𝗧𝗏's live collaborative practices are made with the aim of motivating the audience to join in and to activate the social milieu in which these practices unfold. According to Boris Groys, the tendency toward collaborative participatory practice is certainly one of the main characteristics of contemporary art, and we could add contemporary performance. Emerging throughout the world are numerous artist groups that pointedly stipulate collective, even anonymous, authorship of their artistic production. However, only a few postmodern performance artists have tried to regain common ground with their audience by enticing them out of their passive roles using political or social engagement. When the viewer is involved in artistic practice from the outset, every piece of criticism he utters is self-criticism. This decision by the artist to give up their exclusive authorship would seem primarily to empower the viewer. This sacrifice ultimately benefits the artist, however, for it frees him from the power that the cold eye of the uninvolved viewer exerts over the resulting artwork. Therefore, the text of the performance is not the result of the self-importance of many postmodern directors or post-dramatic directors who are craving recognition. The emergence of a director theater was rather potentially established in the aesthetic dialectics of dramatic theater itself, which in its development as a form of presentation increasingly discovered the means and devices that are inherent to the performance without regard to the text. At the same time, one has to realize the productive side in some of contemporary authors' lack of consideration for the possibilities of the theater. It seems like that the theater emancipated itself from a dramatic text, but also the dramatic text emancipated itself from the theater. So Martin Krim, Tim Crouch, Alice Birch, Kata Weber, Biljana Srbljanović, Lucia Calamaro write in such a way that the stage for their text largely still remains to be invented. The challenge to discover new potentials of writing, the challenge to discover new potentials of the art of theater has become an essential dimension of writing for the theater. Brecht's demand that authors should not supply the theater with their text but instead try to change it has been realized in many ways. And to quote Hansi Lehmann, he said, Heiner Miller even declared that the theater text was only good if it was unstageable for the theater as it is. So the strong urge of contemporary artists like 𝘀𝗀𝗧𝗏 or Polish to make their art useful could be seen historically as a new position and requires new theoretical reflection. Their thesis is more or less similar. The theater rejects the text as a foreign body, as a world outside of the stage. The central goal of such reflection should be to analyze with precision the meaning and political function of the performance text. Only then will this dilemma be settled and will such productions be generally accepted even if outside of mainstream theater. And in the end, I would like to show a following video as a possibility of a new language, not written, and it's exactly what I mean by performance text, that was created as a collaboration between two artists from the Wooster group, Irfan Brković, who made video, and Eric Slater of sound. While the company rehearsals had to be interrupted due to the corona, the two worked separately on the material that had previously been developed for the production of Bertolt Brecht's The Mother. For this video, they combined audiovisual motives with the music samples by the composer Amir El-Safar. On view is a video that was reframed for the 2020 festival, which gives an exclusive insight into the research material of the Wooster Group and which can be found in one form or another in their performance of The Mother, directed by Elisabeth Leconte. And I think one of these days there is a premiere. Okay, so I will show that. Here it is. I have this 8 minutes for that. Okay. Okay, perfect. And the sound, you told me you're going to make the sound available, right? Okay, thanks.
didn't even think about it, giving it up, because it seemed to us now, without anyone saying it, that the important thing was that they hit and cut down exactly us and take away the flag, exactly ours, the red one.
You don't have to give it up. The police can have nothing against a peaceful demonstration.
Part of this production made by Booster Group, and they're always using some kind of video material and different layers and materials, so written, spoken text, music, video and digital projections and everything. So this was a way how to, in a certain way, tell the story of this production by different means. I mean, the text of the performance, the text of the performance in different in different language, which is not verbal, which is not logocentric.
Now we can open a discussion. Is there someone on Zoom? No. Okay. Do we have some questions, some comments from the audience? Okay. So maybe I start. Exactly this impossible situation of analyzing such performances, such performance texts that are so complex. taking into account so different elements. Sometimes when I think of this, I think this is an impossible task. Then sort of one sort of realizes that the only possible thing one can do is to describe the impact, the subjective image of the reception. Do you have some ideas on how to sort of make such analysis more solid, more not objective, of course, but anyway more scientific, if this is the expression that one could use here?
I'm not sure about that. Okay. Because there are two ways looking at this. One is from the perspective of the theater director. So they usually, some of them, like let's say Richard Schechner or Oliver Frljić or René Polish, they do some kind of noting down, watching each performance, and then discussing with actors what to do, how to change something. And these are, we can say that there are no more final productions, but always open rehearsals. And especially Wooster Group is doing that, you know. They bring the audience at the very beginning of the process, and the audience lively and actively participates this whole process. And then there is this position of the critic or spectator that comes afterwards. In the United States, together with Michael Kirby and also Schechner and the others, there was this idea that the criticism should be abolished completely, and that there should be only the description, the thorough description of the performance. And that was before the digital era. And now the digitalization gives the possibility to have the whole performance documented. So I think also that the dimension of the performance text, which is most important, is of course a final document of what was going on. But something cannot be reproduced, and as 𝘂𝗃𝗄𝐻 would say about the performance, if it gets reproduced, if it gets documented, it's no longer a performance. So we have grown up with this kind of idea that whatever happens in the theater cannot be repeated again. So there is always something which is, like in Lacanian terms, how do you say, escaping the interpretation. It becomes an unfulfilled desire.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I preferred the sentence, "Stage for contemporary drama has yet to be invented." It had to be invented for abstract theater also. And I like this, and I think this is something which is very important for when we speak about the contemporary drama, but it could be also a plays which are co-written by Frljić, René Polish, and the others in this way.
But I think that the new way of writing has been done. I mean, you cannot anymore say any longer, is René Polish a writer or a theater director? The same thing about Oliver Frljić and many others, Elisabeth Leconte. Elisabeth Leconte, they are doing some kind of collective writing. That's what I meant by bringing the collective participatory art. And I think that's one way of doing the theater. And the other way is writing for the theater that doesn't exist. Because we see all new plays that they don't have to do anything with the traditional theater. I mean, or they have, like in 𝘀𝗀𝗻𝗔𝗄𝗃, she is the first one who completely destroyed the dramaturgical writing. Before her, Brecht started, but he was still the man of his epoch, and he was writing normal plays, so-called normal. Meanwhile, 𝘀𝗀𝗻𝗃 completely destroyed that, and many others. So I think, you know, that the theater and drama, they got so much separated. And the tension that existed much more before now has been, you know, they have two separate lives. It's like husband and wife, you know, husband. I always see that, you know. So they're happily divorced, you know. So you can now write anything you want, you know, and maybe it will be staged. And at the same time, you can do anything you want with the written text. Put the documents, put theoretical text, put political speeches, advertisements, and such things. So it's really total freedom in a way.
Liberating, but at the same time, I think we have to reflect on how our position, not as theater critics, but mainly as theater theoreticians,
Right.
scholars, because it's not our job to say this is good and this is bad,
No.
but it is, though it is now possible to, in the digital era, to have the recordings and everything, but it's at the same time impossible to capture the event, the energy that flows.
Maybe, but maybe also, no, I don't know if anybody watched during this lockdown and everything, there were many performances in streaming, and somehow they worked. I mean, they worked like forced entertainment. They had exactly done, you know, how people behave on Zoom or Google Meet or everything. They did small performances of 20 minutes, and you can see them on their site. And it's how the people, now they use this new language to create some kind of new performance which is not defined for the stage, and it can be done by other means, or like before surveillance camera players, or the group of yes men. So, you know, they're using different languages but doing some kind of performance, theater performance in a certain way.
Do we have some more questions? Aldo?
Hello, Aleksandra.
Hello,
Aldo.
Yes.
You now
Nice to
see me,
see
yes,
you.
because I have the mask. Congratulations for your excellent lecture. I followed it via streaming.
Okay.
And then I ran to the institute because I have one question for you. Look, you mentioned Heiner Müller and his famous position or statement that the drama text should produce the kind of resistance to the theater, and that's the way how we should work with text in contemporary theater. Okay, that's the statement I like very much. I quoted it many times in text and lectures and so. But after your lecture, and running to the institute, I was thinking on my way what it means exactly. If we say the literature, the drama text should produce a kind of resistance to the theater, maybe I'm quite sure that Heiner Müller had in mind, in his mind, that the classical drama text, more traditional, realistic dialogues, and things like that. But in contemporary situation, we have, of course, a lot of drama text or semi-drama text that are not classical in that sense. After all, we have, for instance, Hamlet Machine by the same Heiner Müller, which is very untypical text. At that time, it was quite revolutionary text, but today it is nothing special. And we have a lot of already ontological stagings of that text. So what it means today? What means that Heiner Müller statement? What it means today? And if we say theater, what we are talking about, of course, we all think that we know what is theater, but the theater is, again, a historical notion. It is not, theater in the 18th century or in 21st century, it is not the same time, obviously. So what kind of theater, what kind of text, and what kind of resistance today?
But no, my idea was based on exactly the following thing. When reading the new plays, I see that they are sometimes not written like lazy drama just to be read, but they have their own, how to say, logic and laws and everything, and structure and syntax and whatever. They're not written for the actors to be performed. Meanwhile, in the theater, something else is going on. The texts are created during the performance, during the rehearsals. And then after all this, when the last performance is done, that is the text written. And the text cannot include, I mean, it can include all the material things, but it cannot include the energy, the atmosphere, the reaction of the public, and stuff like that. But there are also directors who are listening to the actors, to the public, and trying to involve the reaction of the public. But that is also nothing new in the theater. I think that the theater emancipated itself from the text in a sense that the performance, that the actors, the bodies, the relationship with the audience became more important than the written text. Meanwhile, the written text has its own logic, its own history, and I think that maybe it's the same situation like it was in times of Aristotle. So Aristotle came like 100 years after about 100 years after the golden period of Greek drama. And they didn't know how it was performed, this Greek drama. But then later in Renaissance, it was discovered that there was lots of music, which was lost, and what was going on with the public and everything. There are scarce documents. The only documents we interpreted the Greek drama through the written text, but it's not that one. Aristotle is the reader and not the spectator. So I think that's today also we have the same situation. We have spectators but not the readers, or we have only readers but not the spectators. I don't really know what could be. You know, even Edward Gordon Craig was complaining that there was no stage for Shakespeare. And maybe cinema was something for Shakespeare. Maybe the new plays, the new drama is through the use of digital or some kind of like these layers of, or maybe what Big Art Group, or what is their name, or Elevator Repair Service, they're doing like live cinema or something like that. I really don't know. It's just speculation. Many possibilities and no possibility. You have questions?
Thank you. Okay, now I give the podium to... we have another question? The last one, of course.
Sorry, if we don't have enough time. I don't know whether this example with classic drama fits what Aldo was asking, because it was performed. Perhaps Aristotle didn't know how it was performed. He was a reader, right, but these texts were definitely performed. Right. So the tension created between the text and the performance was still there. Today, we live in a moment in which, okay, performance is emancipated from the text is emancipated from the performance, and what do we get? Didn't we lose a certain complicated and interesting tension between something written and something performed? That's the way I understood this question. What is resistance? What is text today? What is resistance? What is theater today?
Well, that is, I don't know how to answer that, because for me, I think that performative dimension of the theater is the most important. I think that the theater can exist without text completely. There are these kind of improvisations a la Rimini Protocol that many are imitating now, and you almost don't have a text. You have some kind of script.
No, definitely.
You know,
I know
franchise.
That.
They have a franchise. They do this kind of like 100% Berlin or 100% this and that city. So it's some kind of. There is a whole list of their performances they are doing in different parts of the world. So it is still considered the theater, because what is the basis of the theater is this relationship created with the audience and with the performance. So the bodies are important, the co-presence of bodies, right, in a sense. And the written text can exist or not. That's why I think that the written text, the drama text, has this immense possibility to experiment, to have this kind of long sentences, long, even poetical text. Many writers nowadays are writing poetry more than really dramatic text, and that I really like, because they're freed of the restrictions of the stage, and they can do this kind of experimentation in writing. Or, it started with Gertrude Stein. Her plays seemed.
I know all that. That is not my question. I know all that. I'm just asking whether in this moment,
right,
we somehow miss a certain restriction. What do we get with this?
But what do you intend by restriction? What?
You say they are free. Performances are free. Texts are free.
Right.
And perhaps we need also
but
a bit less freedom.
Perhaps. I don't really know.
Okay. The last question will be posed by 𝘀𝗶𝗺𝗫𝗀𝗃 through Krištof, and then we move to the third session.
It's interesting, this absolute optimism that you sort of exude, right? I mean, you allow everybody to be as free as possible, which I understand this question very well. And as a moderator, I'm going to allow myself to pose another question in actually standing in for 𝘀𝗶𝗺𝗺𝗃. And his question is, can you please comment on the texts such as Beckett's Act Without Words, where there is no spoken word, or Handke's Offending the Audience, where there is no defined speaker?
Well, I can comment because I know both of them very well. The insult to the audience by Peter Handke was some kind of also breakthrough to try. He did something like to liberate the theater from the plot, from the characters, from thought, dialogue, whatever. And I'm not sure if he succeeded, if that was a good way. Meanwhile, Beckett, I think, did a wonderful thing, because this is possible. One of his most fantastic performances is Without Breath, right? He was thinking about that, or when there is only a pile of garbage on the stage, and there is just one inhale and exhale. And Damien Hirst did a wonderful video on that. So I think, again, that can be a theater performance, but it was better done as a video.
Well, thank you. I hope it
not
went
this
across the
authority.
pond.
You're all asking me questions like I'm the ultimate authority on theater and drama. No, it was my text was an attempt to open a dialogue between the...
Aleksandra, you're the subject supposed to know.
So I failed this exam. I'm sorry.
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so thank you very much for this inspiring introductory lecture into our afternoon session. And I'm opening the third installment, actually, of our conference today, with my colleague Tomaž Toporišič from the Theatre Academy from Ljubljana. I don't think he needs any particular introduction to any of us, so I'll just refrain from that. And Tomaž will talk to us about how can we interpret the 21st century, no longer dramatic text and theater in art and theory. So as I understand, you're going to be opting for less freedom, as we just heard.
I'm always opting for freedom, especially in the time of the COVID crisis, because we don't have any freedom, so it's basically we have to be. But within the field of literature, I think that the freedom gets and it fades. But an interesting thing when you discuss now, Aleksandra opened a lot of things which I think a lot about and write a lot about, and in a very, very good way. And when we think about the drama resisting theater, we can have a very good example of one of the dramatists I'm going to talk about today. It's Simona Semenič. We can see during the stagings of her plays that basically she writes plays that need to that make the theater practitioners to invent new ways to present them. And she had a lot of problems during maybe 8 or 9 years, that they did not stage her plays because basically the national theaters, the repertory theaters did not know how to do it. But, for example, Handke did not have this problem because basically he found somebody to stage his offending the audience. But now I think she found it out. And when I was referring to the theater of the absurd, I was referring to Mirjana Milučinović, who writes in her excellent book that basically it was in the time of the absurd drama, that absurd drama was basically the one which generated new theater. And I think this is something and I'm going to speak about this dangerous relationship or between drama and theater. We're living still in an area of the dangerous relationships between drama and theater. I will have to take just 3 examples because we don't have more time, and I will focus on 3 contemporary playwrights, Anja Hilling, Dino Pešut, and Simona Semenič, trying to define the status of contemporary playwrights after the post-dramatic turn. I will seek the answers to the question in which we can interpret the changes of drama and text and how the plays they wrote lead to I think new definitions of textual in dramatic. Today, when the fact that new textual practices have redefined contemporary theater and performing arts in general, when this fact is obvious, we will try to locate new emancipated approaches to producing and reading text for theater. I will be interested in how, in the case of the playwrights selected, a specific return to the theater of words as defined by the French theorist of contemporary drama Elisabeth Angel Perez took place. How today's theater and drama are still post-dramatic, but nevertheless establish a new return to the dramatic and dramatized. The return of to experiments belonging to what Angel Perez calls the so-called post-dramatic theater, but as post-deconstructional theater, they finally re-dramatized everything they tried to dramatize. So we have a specific procedure going on in the contemporary drama and theater, and the question proposed therefore reads as follows: can post-dramatic theater also be understood as continuity and not primarily as a disintegration? To put it a little differently, I will be interested in the extent to which the selected authors take us beyond post-drama to what Sylvie Montfort names non-drama theater, or to the dramatic drama, I use the term of Birgit Haas, or post-drama theater, to use the term of Angel Perez. To which extent the author maintains his presence through the processes during which drama and theater become rhapsodized, brought closer to lyricism, novel, or essay. How does new drama create new configurations of language, of text and stage that allow us to creatively cross the boundaries between fiction, self-fiction, and authenticity? I will begin with the German drama of the first 2 decades of the new century. The theorist of contemporary drama after 2000, Daniela Kapusta, dedicates her book Transformation of Persons on the construction and deconstruction of the person in German theater and at the turn of the millennium to the shifts in German drama of recent decades. She finds out that Anja Hilling and her contemporaries use the text as something which is not fixed, but rather a material as a beginning of something that has not yet emerged. So this is the quotation of her. But at the same time, these plays following the post-dramatic era are strongly opposed to a cold and distant approach and try to find a way to change into something that has emotions and feelings. And they are something that differs from the so-called post-dramatic text, or how we imagine this post-dramatic text, or how we got used to imagine this post-dramatic text. Another theorist of contemporary drama, Birgit Haas, points out that Hilling's play The Black Animal Sadness is realistic, but almost too realistic. She speaks about the defamiliarized realism that could be interpreted as a critique of the cliched aesthetic of television. 𝘂𝗃𝗧𝗢𝗡 does not use deconstructive procedures in order to get rid of the linear and synthetic structure of the narrative, yet she uses a critique of both dramatic and mediatized forms of jargon of righteousness to reveal the banal but dangerous repetitions of the spectacle's everyday society. While Brecht sought to achieve a productive dialogue between different strata of history by choosing between them, Hilling achieves the productive interrogation of the aesthetic realm of television and theater. With 𝘂𝗃𝗧𝗢𝗡, the text passes from monologue to a dialogical form, and the form of a side text, even an essay. The dividing lines between the main and the side text are blurred, unclear. Spoken text is not attributed to specific persons. The didascalia is no longer the only part of the dramatic text in which the author appears as a subject. He or she is not absent, but it's present everywhere. Hilling deliberately tests different forms, and when they're no longer enough for her, she simply discards them and replaces them with the others. In this way, she's very similar to Simona Semenič and other contemporary dramatists. She thematizes the problems of the individual and testifies to the fact that the modern dramatic writing requires a specific type of theater, that's what you were talking about, acting technique and other segments of theatrical science system, to use the semiological terms. It is the dramatic writing that, after the post-dramatic turn, similar as to the drama of episode of Beckett, Ionesco, Pinter, again becomes the one that generates theatrical procedures and aesthetics. Compared to German colleagues, 𝘂𝗃𝗧𝗢𝗡, Simona Semenič, a Slovene contemporary playwright, is more radically opposed to representation. She constantly interrupts dramatic events with authoritarian interventions while exploiting Deleuze's procedures of repetition through otherness, which destabilizes the reader. But Semenič offers him or her, namely the reader, also the aesthetic pleasure and a specific alliance with the author, which is also something very specific for the contemporary playwrights. But this no longer dramatic production, despite its densely populated meta-theatrical and meta-dramatic commentaries, produces strong fiction and reader identification. The dialogue form is persistently reworked with diverse textual strategies, but in doing so, her plays produce distinctly dramatic effects, which Haas would probably call dramatically dramatic. And of course, they're also Brechtian. This is one of the qualities Haas wants to re-establish in the contemporary theater. Therefore, the deconstruction of the dramatic and fictional, which reminds us sometimes of Pirandello in the writings of Semenič, produces a special post-Brechtian critique of the real. In this sense, she's interested in something similar to 𝘂𝗃𝗧𝗢𝗡, the different layers of truth. As the last example of the contemporary drama, we'll take Dino Pešut, a playwright and novelist, a representative of the Croatian, let us say, post-dramatic or post-dramatic metadrama of the millennial generation. His plays are written in a real Babylon of dramatic, prose, poetic, and essayistic tactics, united by the author's strong engagement to write about many times banal reality. He seems to be returning to dramas of language and verbal violence, but he incorporates all this into polyphony of voices, inner monologues, and other speech surfaces, to use the term of Elfriede Jelinek. The dramatic way of dialogues often turn into quasi-dialogues, long monologue structures, puzzle quotes, and poeticized speech. To slowly conclude, Semenič, Hilling, and Pešut stubbornly persist, convincing the reader and viewer that they are not absent, that they are here with soul and body at things, and that they will not surrender to the either post-dramatic or immersive or classically dramatic and its illusions. contemporary drama establishes a powerful process of redramatization. It is as if, at the same time as the deconstruction of the dramatic, the process of reintroducing the dramatic and the dramatic into the post-dramatic fabric of games is taking place. The dramatic thus coexists with the post-dramatic and the post-post-dramatic and no longer dramatic. Nor does the decomposition and rebuilding of the dramatic imply uncriticism of what Birgit Haas understands as a lack of three-dimensionality or no more dramatic text, as mere speech plates, so to say. The writings of the new dramatist can therefore be interpreted as a clear consequence as well as the author's response to the crisis of drama as defined by a French theoretician Jean-Pierre Sarrazac. The crisis of dialogue, which can be quasi-dialogue, quasi-monologue, that turns into a secondary text of description, the crisis of the relationship between the stage and the auditorium that constantly reminds us that we are in the theater, but at the same time also within the realm of the everyday life. The crisis of the fabula, resolved by each author in its specific way. Semenich resolves this crisis through the deconstruction and reconstruction of the fabula as a parallel event. Healing through the gradual breakdown of the fabula of a specific but at the same time the specific fabularization, which nevertheless exposes the reader to the communication disorders, creating a distinct aesthetic. And pursued with the simultaneous depoetization and poetization of drama through various techniques of editing related to the morphology of popular culture, which producing specific duplications. Using the examples discussed, we can therefore make the following preliminary thesis. Yes, we can interpret the post-dramatic theater as a specific continuity and not primarily as a breakup with the tradition. And yes, we can say that the contemporary drama often exposes us to the deconstruction of the contrast between representation and presentation. But nevertheless, the contemporary drama establishes a powerful process of redramatization, of injecting the dramatic into the post-dramatic. So this would be my theory.
Thank you very much. Our norm is that the questions come at the end of the session. So next speaker is our colleague Blaž Lukan, from the Theater Academy of Ljubljana. Blaž Lukan being, of course, a practitioner and theoretician of theater, right? And you will, if I understand your title correctly, simply continue and even delve deeper into the topic that Tomaž opened, namely, you'll be asking yourself about post-post drama or the heavily broken dramatic world. The floor is yours.
It's my attempt. Hvala. Jaz bom govoril v slovenščini. Bravo. Moj namen je bil dosti bolj skromen kot mojih predhodnikov. Približati se nekaterim značilnostim nove drame, jaz si rečem, da je nova drama, skozi študijo, skozi case study, pisanja mlade avtorice, ampak začetek bo bolj splošen. Se pravi, moj prispevek je imel premislek sodobno dramo, ki jo pogojno imenuje nova drama. Nova drama, kot jo razumem sam, je nova zlasti potem, da vse predhodno, inventivno in učinkovito predela v nov, do tega trenutka še neobstoječ dramski in uprizoritveni sistem, ki kliče po ustrezni samorefleksiji oziroma refleksiji. Recimo, da je ena ključnih značilnosti nove drame odprava ustaljenih zaporedij, hierarhij, razlik, delitev, ki jih je tako jasno in razločno popisovala in predpisovala kot prva aristotelovska dramaturgija. Tukaj pojem nove drame razumem zelo široko, torej kot tekstno prakso, o kateri lahko govorimo od pojava moderne drame naprej in to v povsem zondjevskem pomenu. Dehierarhizacija temeljnih razmerij, ki določajo dramski in ali uprizoritveni diskurs, pomeni tudi njihovo reintegracijo in dekolonizacijo. tekst ne kolonizira več scene, kar je dramsko-gledališka paradigma, vendar tudi scena ne več teksta, kar je postdramska paradigma. Zvrstne zakonitosti, ki jih predpisuje ali le registrira literarna teorija ali zgodovina, se umaknejo užitku v pisavi. Dolgi 1,5 tisoč opevano objektivnost dramskega dialoga pa nadomesti zaveza subjektivnosti, ki nekdanjo odgovornost višji sili, resnici, nenadoma pripiše vsej možni iluziji, ki določa eksistenco sodobnega subjekta. In zato nam najprej gre, če začnem splošnim. Čeprav nižja sila si je sodobni subjekt zmožen prilastiti vse, kar prečka njegovo polje interesa, pri čemer vse slišno in vidno, zapisano ali sanjano, absolutno in kontingentno, fake ali resnično, reintegrira ter deformatizira in reformatizira. Hkrati pa si ne lasti nobene pravice ali patenta za svoje spontane iznajdbe. Ničesar in nikogar noče ponovno kolonizirati. Pri tem proizvede neko novo, ki morda sploh ni nova, entiteto, ki jo lahko samo v približku poimenujemo identiteta. Saj gre za, na prvi pogled, še popolnoma nesistematični seštevek impulzov ali vtisov, za konglomerat sestavljen iz nanodelcev sveta, v narekovajih, hiperlink z neskončno potmi, ki se križajo v vseh dimenzijah, za videoklip s 1000 sličicami na milisekundo. Podoba je pretirana, se je substanca te subjektove dvoosne istosti v resnici zelo preprosta. Na prvi osi jo določa maksimalna odzivnost na svet in na drugi osi odgovornost, ki je v resnici selektivni mehanizem. Jaz je mogoče kolonizirati samo z jazom samim in samo na ta način v procesu nenehnega podvajanja je mogoče doseči lastno istovetnost oziroma istost. Vendar ali je ta istovetnost res še entiteta oziroma identiteta ali pa gre morda za disentiteto, ki nikdar več ne more biti cela in ista. To je samo na prvi pogled filozofsko vprašanje, v resnici gre za dramsko-teoretsko, dramaturško vprašanje. To je namreč vprašanje o subjektu izjavljanja ali drugače rečeno o pripovedovalcu v novi drami. Jaz v svetu, ki pripoveduje zgodbo v avtoreferencialnem dramskem formatu, je namreč neločljivi del konteksta, torej pripovedi same. Kar pa ne pomeni niti, da se drama dogaja na relaciji jaz-svet, niti se ne dogaja v jazu ali sebstvu samem. Drama se dogodi nekje drugje, v neki ex-entiteti, v neki nedosežni istovetnosti, v kontekstu, ki je sicer sestavljen iz mnoštva tekstov, vendar v resnici od njih odlepljen. Sam zase kot neka vrsta absolutni duh, ki pa vzvratno vendarle v popolnosti določa tudi življenje teksta ali subjekta. Pripovedovalec je potemtakem paradoksno znotraj in zunaj hkrati, površina in jedro, tekst in kontekst, subjekt in objekt, za katerega je značilno, kot že rečeno, zlasti neskončno hitro plastenje, vrstenje vtisov in izjav. Te prihajajo iz različnih virov in kontekstov, so po naravi hibridne, vendar na isti liniji, del istega kontinuuma, ki jih slogovno postavlja na isti imenovalec. Če je dramski avtor nekoč sledil logiki jezika in kavzalne dramaturške konstrukcije oziroma je pripoved podredil obvezujoči logiki v sebi zaključenih fragmentov, zdaj ti fragmenti razpadajo do nespoznavnega in jih določa predvsem hitrost sledenja avtomatiziranemu toku misli, podobno kot v nadrealizmu, ki pa je danes bliže logiki delovanja digitalnih naprav. Pri tem se brišajo prehodi, ki so bili v stari drami ključni markerji njene časovne komponente. Namesto sistematično strukturirane dramske pripovedi pa zdaj prevlada tok, flow, ki ga dramatik oziroma drama samo začasno zaustavi v njegovem neskončnem gibanju. Kontekst oziroma kontekstualnost postane multikontekstualnost oziroma multikontekst, ikoničnost pripovedi multiikoničnost, dramska pisava pa binarno zaporedje ničel in enic, torej vzponov in padcev, hotenj in nehanj, volje in nemoči, spominov in vizij, želja in travm, v divjem drncu v digitalno neskončnost. Slika je, vem, spet pretirana, zato je treba razumeti predvsem kot prispodobo. Hkrati ne velja za vso novo v narekovajih dramo in z njo uprizoritveno prakso, ki nastaja v tem trenutku. Skuša pa predvsem ponazoriti neko kondicijo trenutka, ki je v realnem času deležna nenehnih korektur in dopolnitev. Naj si bo strani individualnega talenta in inspiracije, naj si bo strani splošne historične izkušnje ali privzemanja znanih dramsko-pripovednih modelov. Delno sodobno dramo korigira tudi konkretna uprizoritvena praksa, ki z eno besedo rečemo gledališki trg. Najbrž je izpovedanega že dovolj jasno, da nova drama s svojo filozofijo, narekovajih, povsem razločno naslavlja tudi probleme sodobne družbe, da je torej v svojem temelju tudi politična, ideološka, pa naj bo ta političnost ideološko še tako implicitna. Zdaj prehajam na konkretno. Teksti 𝗀𝗺𝗀𝗀𝗧𝗧, ki jih bom tu samo delno skiciral, oziroma podal neko možno interpretacijo. Poznamo jo, je letnik 1993. So sodobne drame, čeprav se z lastno zvrstnostjo ukvarjajo samo, kolikor ta dopolnjuje sam tekst kot tekst. Zvrstnost ne pomeni nekakšnega, se pravi dramskost, ne pomeni nekakšnega okvirja ali modela teksta, temveč je v resnici njena vsebina. Drama je drama sveta in svet je raznovrsten oziroma raznozvrsten, vanjo iz sveta prenikajo najrazličnejši čutni vtisi, estetike, metodologije in dramatičarka jih izbira in beleži. Njena drama je tako lahko monolog, taka je drama Najraje bi se udrla v zemljo iz letošnjega leta, receptna sonata, taka je drama Zlata ptička, črna vrana, enako objavljena je bila letos. Lahko pa je tudi brezvrstne oznake, taka je drama Vse se je začelo z golažem iz zajčkov iz leta 2019. Varini teksti so primeri nove drame, v katerih lahko razberemo nekatere značilnosti, ki jih sicer poznamo v dramatiki že od modernizma naprej, predvsem pa v postdrami, vendar so v tem primeru radikalizirane, točneje izpisane z novim občutkom za tekst in kontekst. Nova je tudi njihova avtorica, piše že dokaj dolgo, njena dramska pisava je doživela razvoj od začetnih poetično-nadrealističnih tekstov preko filmskega realizma do trenutne nove abstrakcije. Kako Varja piše? Sledi podobi, poetičnim vtisom in jezikovnim vzorcem. V njeni pisavi je skrito hotenje, predvsem v tisti začetni. Zdaj, v tej fazi se vedno bolj prepušča temu, da jo pisava vodi. Kaj je drama? Situacija ali jezik? Včasih bi rekli dialog. Situacija nove drame je jezik, pisava sama, ki pa proizvaja mikrosituacije, zaznamovane z napetostjo. Je napetost še vedno pogoj za dramo? Je, vendar z nujnim pojasnilom. Napetosti ne proizvajajo več raznosmerne tendence protagonistov ali aktantov, temveč so zaobsežene v jeziku. Vendar jezik v tem pogledu ni modernistično linearen, temveč ga določajo govorni položaji, komunikacijska intencionalnost, globinska psihologija izjavljanja, znotraj jezikovna asociativnost in navidezna samonanašalnost, ki pa sega tudi v zunanjost. Jezik v novi drami je v nenehni dinamiki, v prehajanju iz teksta v kontekst in nazaj. Nova drama se rada sprehaja po raznovrstnih kulturoloških poljih. Pri pisanju drame je nujno potreben avtorski odmik. Varja ga premore, na svojo dramo gleda kot na artefakt, ki se izvija iz njene notranjosti, iz njenih rok, pravzaprav pa popolni odmik od drame ni nikdar možen. To je star dramaturški trik, ki drami podeljuje pregovorno objektivnost. Nova drama je celo bliže poeziji, že drame Simone Semenič pogosto delujejo kot dramske pesnitve. Varjine še toliko bolj. Pri tem ne gre samo za videz, ki se odpoveduje formalni notaciji drame v razmerju med glavnim in stranskim tekstom, temveč za princip dramskega diskurza, toka dramske pisave, ki je bliže toku zavesti modernističnega romana, ki se v resnici izliva iz avtorjeve glave, točneje iz njegovega telesa. Morda bi temu postopku lahko s Razakom rekli rapsodičen, vendar ne v izvorno poetičnem, temveč v poznejšem glasbenem smislu. Rapsodija kot svobodna muzikalna forma, kakršno v sodobni slovenski poeziji najdemo denimo pri Nini Dragičević ali Tiborju Hrsu Pandurju. Pri obeh navedenih je zvrstna oznaka poezija samo na nek način zasilna, saj jo določa zlasti mesto izjavljanja in predstavljanja, nikakor pa ne tudi način prezentacije. Varjina drama oziroma tekst torej prihaja iz nekega notranjega vira in se izliva v kontekst, kjer se njena subjektivnost premeša z objektivnostjo sveta ali publike. Njena pisava je kontinuirana, vendar kot bi se na določenih nepredvidljivih mestih prekinjala, kot da jo neka sila od znotraj lomi. Ne gre za velike prelome, za taljenje ledenikov, temveč za cefranje in paranje, ki pa nikdar ne načne substance. Dramsko tkanje na koncu ostane celo, ampak celo v narekovajih, zaradi problematičnosti pojma kot takega. Nobena izkušnja ni cela, cela je nemara samo njena fantazma. Nenavadno je, kako se Varjina pisava skozi tok odpira, ne zapira, kot bi njena premisa na začetku bila samo sprožilo, ki se do kraja razživi šele skozi akt samega pisanja. Asociacije se nalagajo, prva rodi drugo in tako naprej do konca, ki pa je, kot recimo v drami Zlata ptička, črna vrana, samo še onomatopoetičen, stripovski, kot bi drama prešla v neki drug žanr, samo še v zvok ali njegovo grafično ponazoritev. Nova drama je, to je sicer tvegana trditev, torej bolj spontani rezultat akta pisanja, kakor vnaprejšnje gradnje. Sodobna dramatičarka dramo piše, ne gradi. Seveda, če se takoj popravimo, to drži samo delno. Nova drama je manj gradnja, prvič zaradi svobodne rabe oblikovnih dramaturških zakonitosti, drugič zaradi nagnjenosti k rapsodičnosti, tretjič zaradi sprotne in spontane konstrukcije subjekta, ki ga pred pisanjem ni, se med samim aktom pisanja vzpostavi kot izrazita volja do pisave in z izvenom teksta ponovno ponikne v kontekst. In četrtič, ker je gradnja, conditio sine qua non, vsake pisave in je ni treba posebej izpostavljati, tako kot jezik se tudi drama gradi od znotraj. A zgoraj rečeno ne pomeni, da sodobni dramatik kaj manj dela, če ga ne zanima več toliko psihologija likov, zato pa zagotovo samoanaliza ali celo avtoterapija, pa je mnogo bolj zaposlen s stanjem sveta, torej s kontekstom. V tem nikakor ni inovativno kontekstu, v drami govorimo praktično od 𝘀𝗀𝗙𝗍𝗀𝗍 naprej. Nov je nemara princip pretočnosti, ki v dramo prepušča kontekst v nepredelani obliki. Sama drama ni več koncentrat, alegorija, parabola sveta, ki je v končni posledici njegov nadomestek, stvaritev ex nihilo, ki konkurira Božji. Temveč kontekstu priznava premoč oziroma ga le usmerja, kanalizira v bližino lastnega sveta. V tem zaznavamo nekakšen paralelizem, ki novi drami hkrati daje in jemlje avtentično moč. Ko se izpoveduje in na trenutke celo dopoveduje, v narekovajih, o razmerju med tekstom in kontekstom, subjektom in objektom, si ne domišlja, da kreira novi svet, zagotovo pa v njem priča v vseh konotacijah tega pojma. Je v tem svetu kar se da prisotna, dejavno spremlja njegov potek in o njem govori, piše, in pogosto je dramski avtor ali avtorica edina priča nekega sveta v minevanju. Potem takem je tudi njegov ali njen opis tega sveta edino pričevanje, ki bo o njem obstalo. V Varjinih dramah iz zadnjega časa najdemo tudi nekaj izrazitih formalno-slogovnih značilnosti. Princip naštevanja, linearnega zaporednega vrstenja, kopičenja opisov, podatkov, metafor je v sodobni drami pogost. Morda bi v njem našli možnost dramatičnosti. Tiste kategorije, ki jo tradicionalna drama proizvede svojo kompleksno vzporedno strukturo. Razlika med zaporednostjo in vzporednostjo je nemara ključna. Čeprav je ne moramo obravnavati vrednostno, saj nova drama dosega svojo dramatično kompleksnost na druge načine. Kljub navidezni premočrtnosti je v naštevanju vselej neko stopnjevanje, ki tendira k poantiranju, ali v zaključeni repliki, ali v tekstni odprtosti. Hkrati je, kar ponovno vemo iz glasbene teorije, v ponavljanju vselej skrita določena moč. Naj si bo polna v narekovajih v ritualu ali prazna v narekovajih recimo v serialnem konceptualizmu. Naštevalnost praviloma implicira fragmentarni princip in s tem napetost fragmenta, s čimer se približa cikličnosti ali celo epskosti modernistične drame. Fragment pa deluje, če citiram Lehmana, kot osvobajajoča možnost nadaljevanja, fantazije in ponovnega kombiniranja. Pogosto se pri novi drami vprašamo, kdo je tisti, ki v njej v nekem trenutku govori. Lik, avtor, fiktivna, neimenovana oseba, pisava, jezik sam. Pravzaprav smo priče nekakšni abstrakciji, odvzemanju nebistvenega, kar je že znan modernistični dramaturški postopek, ki pa zdaj ne nastopa toliko ideološko, temveč bolj pragmatično. Glasov, ki jih drama beleži, preprosto ni treba pripisovati konkretnim govorcem ali osebam. Dovolj je, da vemo, da jih izgovarja oziroma zapisuje dramatik ali dramatičarka. Pravzaprav so to glasovi drame, Drama po sebi je ena sama, bolj ali manj, dolga replika. Nova drama replicira svetu, dramatik ali dramatičarka se nanj odziva svojim avtentičnim, specifičnim glasom, ki ga po potrebi porazdeli med osebe, med izjavljalne modele, situacije in podobno. V resnici pa z dramo spregovori njen avtor oziroma njena avtorica. V Varinih dramah najdemo številne intertekstualne navezave, njihov asociativni tok razkriva nanašanje na mnoge bolj ali manj prepoznavne dramske, literarne, kulturne, filozofske vire. V njih je samo nanašalnost spontana, osebna zgodovina je enako pomembna kot zgodovina sveta. Tudi tekst, ki se v tem trenutku piše, že postaja samosvoja zgodovina. In v drami sta enako pomembni tako akcija kot resignacija. Zdaj smo dejavni akteri nekega realnega ali fiktivnega boja ali tekme. V naslednjem hipu smo že utopljeni v nerazpoznavnost temne tvari sodobnega bivanja. Varina drama je glede uprizoritvenega miselnega horizonta, in s tem bom zaključil ta prispevek, raznovrstna in na neki način oportuna v narekovajih, saj se prilagaja vsakokratnim okoliščinam, ki definirajo nastanek tega ali onega teksta. Seveda, oportunost v tem kontekstu ni niti estetska, niti moralna, niti politična kategorija, temveč predvsem priča o prilagodljivosti nove drame danim okoliščinam. Nagnjenost k prezentaciji je sicer še vedno njena neločljiva značilnost, vendar so možnosti, ki se pri tem odpirajo, nekonvencionalne in praktično neskončne. Sam tekst se z uprizoritvijo ne obremenjuje več. Uprizoritev na noben način ni več nujno upisana van, kar je modernistična teoretska paradigma. Nemara je garant uprizorljivosti že samo poimenovanje določenega besedila kot drame, uprizoritvene predloge ali uprizoritvenega teksta, celo samo pisanje za določen namen, če si prikličemo spomin, Varino uprizoritev na Facebooku, ali po naročilu. Drama je tako, tvegam, tisto, kar avtor, tako dramski avtor kot avtor uprizoritve, poimenuje kot dramo ali dramsko predlogo, uprizoritveni tekst in podobno. Še več, drama je tisto, kar kot dramo prezentira producent ali služba za odnose z javnostjo ustrezne inštitucije in se v recepcijskem obratu dokaže kot drama tudi pri publiki in kritiki. Trditev se brez dvoma zdi sporna, saj prvič izpričuje neskončno arbitrarnost poimenovanja, ki zanika vsakršno žanrsko naravo določenega teksta, in drugič pristaja na neoliberalno logiko promocije, ki v temelju definira reprezentacijske mehanizme umetniškega dela, mimo vsakršne estetske ali ontološke substancialnosti. Vendar je nemara ravno ta spornost še en dokaz ali inkarnacija novodobnega spora ali konflikta kot vira novodramske napetosti, ki, kot že rečeno, zaznamuje sodobno novo dramo in nemara sodobno umetnostno produkcijo nasploh. Hvala.
Thank you, Blaž. We just have to hurry on. And my pleasure is to introduce to you as a next speaker, Hanna Veselovska, our colleague, dramaturg, translator, theater critic, and whatnot, right? What you didn't do. At present, you're employed here at the Theater Institute. And actually, you'll be simply going on with the topic, perhaps more being, your topic is going to be more bound to what Ms. Jovićević had said. Namely, you'll be talking about the text as the, quote, trace that the performance leaves on paper, end of quote. So, Anna, here you go.
Thank you. Hello. slovenščino. V začetku tretjega dela študije l'analyse des textes dramatiques de 𝘂𝗃𝗄𝗃 Matris Pavi ugotavlja, da so se v obdobju po letu 2000 pojavili pisci, ki specifičnimi pristopi predstavljajo odmik od značilnosti, zajetih v oznaki dramski avtor, in da so besedila čedalje bolj vezana na način njihove scenske uresničitve. Zaradi tovrstne povezanosti se pri posameznih gledaliških projektih vprašanje avtorstva vzpostavlja v drugačnih okvirih. Sicer pa je, kot poudari 𝘂𝗲𝗄, različne besedilno-gledališke usmeritve novega stoletja tipološko težko razmejiti na medsebojno povezan način, ne z tematskega, ne z oblikovnega vidika. Kot meni, bi morda še najbolj ustrezalo razlikovanje na osnovi samega nastanka besedila. Je bilo to napisano pred uprizoritvijo, z mislijo na konkretne ustvarjalce, ali je nastajalo sočasno z uprizoritvenim procesom. V omenjenem delu študije, ki ga posveča časovno najbližjim dramskim pojavom, 𝘂𝗲𝗄 analizira primer pisave 𝘀𝗀𝗄𝗺𝗏 in uvodoma zapiše, citiram: Kajti s 𝘀𝗀𝗄𝗏 in z nekaterimi drugimi avtorji novega stoletja je prišlo do spremembe. Dramsko besedilo izhaja tako rekoč iz scene, scen, in ne obratno, konec citata. Pri obravnavi te spremembe 𝘂𝗲𝗄 tudi omeni oznako, ki se je uveljavila za tovrstne prakse, in sicer 𝘂𝗃𝗃𝗏𝗀𝗏, odrska pisava. Pred nadaljevanjem 𝗀𝗏𝗺𝗏. Plato in sen sta sinonima v pomenu odra v gledališču, vendar ima termin plato tudi pomensko razsežnost vseh produkcijsko nujnih elementov, materialnih in človeških virov za uresničitev predstave. Tako se zdi, da je v pisavo, ki jo termin označuje, vključen tudi vidik ustvarjalnega procesa, medtem ko termin sen označuje tudi samo gledališče oziroma gledališko umetnost. Oznako uporablja tudi Bruno Takels, ki je tako poimenovanim 𝘂𝗃𝗏𝗀𝗏, odrskim piscem, posvetil več monografskih študij in se v esejistični razpravi Les écritures de Plateau et état des lieux osredotočil na dejanje pisave, ki ni več zgolj domeni besedila, temveč je prisotno tudi pri ostalih oblikah scenskega izražanja. Takels se v razpravi usmeri k obravnavi sprememb, do katerih je prišlo v zadnjih desetletjih v odnosu med besedilom in predstavo oziroma režijo. Opozoriti velja, da pri tem združuje silno različne gledališke prakse. Na posamezne, denimo Castelluccija, namenimo prvo monografijo v seriji, je vplival Artaud, ki je v prvem manifestu gledališča krutosti pozival, da je treba odrešiti gledališče njegove zasužnjenosti besedilu. Artaudjevo vizijo predstavlja nekakšen edinstven stvarnik, ki bo nadomestil staro dvojnost pisca in režiserja in prevzel dvojno odgovornost za predstavo in za dogajanje. Obrat od preliminarnega statusa besedil, o katerem govori Artaud, je v srži Takelsovega pogleda na odrsko pisavo, ki je v osnovi prisotna že bistveno dlje od sodobnih manifestacij. Primeri neločljive povezanosti dramskega in odrskega ustvarjalnega dejanja se v gledališki zgodovini ponujajo sami po sebi. V čem naj bi bila torej sprememba pri sodobnih pristopih? Gledališki izvor besedila kot temeljni premik Takels pojasnjuje, citiram: Ne gre nujno za improvizacije, ravno nasprotno. Besede se vpisujejo v tvorbo, ki bistveno dozori v prostoru in času odra, izhajajoč iz vsega, kar ga sestavlja, začenši z igralci. Kajti oni so tisti, ki čedalje bolj nosijo besedilo v nastajanju. Kolikor mogoče v odmiku od dispozitiva triangularne režije, ki režiser naloži svoje videnje besedilu in igralcem. 𝘀𝗀𝗄𝗏, ki ga v prispevku izpostavljam, ključno vlogo igralcev v odnosu do pisave in odra izrazi, kot navaja Takels, s poudarkom, da piše zanje, obenem pa je dejanje njegovega pisanja namenjeno temu, da igralce odpre, jim ponudi dovolj hranljiv material za ustvarjanje. Pri tem ni nepomembna geneza njegovega gledališkega ustvarjanja. V gledališču je najprej pristopil kot igralec, ker pa je v tej vlogi pogrešal avtonomijo, se je odločil za pisanje. O obdobju urjenja, ko svojega pisanja še ni preizkušal na odru, je pozneje v esejističnih zapisih o lastnem razumevanju gledališča povedal: Pisal sem, ne da bi se imel za pisatelja. Pisal sem, da bi lahko mislil. In tako je še danes. Skupino, ki jo je ustanovil leta 1990, je poimenoval Compagnie 𝘀𝗶𝗵𝗏. Ne po resnični, temveč izmišljeni osebi, ki pa ji je nadel premišljeno izbrani priimek. Brouillard ali megla po francosko namreč že vsebuje neko bistveno značilnost njegove poetike, to je nedoločnost ali tudi zavestno gojenje nejasnosti, celo dvoumnosti. Za Pomraja je pomembnejše od odkrivanja neke preproste resnice podajanje zapletenosti resničnosti. S tem skuša pri gledalcu ustvariti stanje zbeganosti, ugotavlja Marion Boudier, in to namero enači z izrazom, ki ga je sam uporabil in ki je postal zanj označevalen. To je izraz trouble, motnja. Citiram: ta zbeganost je tako intelektualna kot čustvena. Je občutek destabilizacije in osuplosti, včasih nerazumevanja, ki stimulira dejavnost mentalne asociacije, interpretacije in širitve zaznavanja. O imenu skupine je možno najti še druge razlage. Kot zapiše Boudier, je med drugim tudi oksimoron, s katerim se naveže na pionirja filmske umetnosti Louisa Lumièra, Lumière tudi kot luč svetloba, saj, kot pravi Boudier, si Pomra na nek način jemlje svobodo in zada izziv, da ponovno iznajde gledališče, to pomeni, da razvije specifičen način dela in s tem izoblikuje lasten gledališki stroj. Besedilno in režijsko pisanje dojema kot dejanji, ki izhajata iz istega vira. Zato je večinoma predstavljen z oznako avtor-režiser. Boudier, ki je Pomrajevo delo teoretsko preučevala, nato pa se je skupini priključila kot dramaturška sodelavka, njegovo razumevanje besedila opisuje kot nehierarhično, saj to ne diktira oblike prisotnosti drugih gledaliških elementov. Tem je beseda enakovredna. Toda sočasno nastajanje besedila in režije ni prepuščeno prostemu sferalnemu toku, temveč temelji na predpripravah, dokumentarnih raziskavah avtorja in njegovih umetniških sodelavcev. V ta razvojni način dela so vključeni tudi igralci. Ker gre za iskateljsko vpetost, je bistvena njihova pripravljenost in ne preseneča, da jih je med njimi več, s katerimi avtor-režiser sodeluje že vrsto let. Prek improvizacij, ki služijo raziskavi, v katere smeri se lahko situacije razvijajo, in z delom na predlaganem materialu, to so denimo besedilni fragmenti, ki se jih naučijo na pamet, po potrebi se pozneje tudi vračajo k starejšim verzijam, prispevajo k Pomrajevemu naknadnemu izoblikovanju besedila. Z osebnostjo in telesno izraznostjo temeljno generirajo samo pisavo. Igralci, njihova prezenca je osnova. Za prezenco, ki je pogosto v besedni rabi skupine, Boudier v poskusu njene definicije pravi, da je, citiram, koncentracija, iskanje iskrenosti, očiščenje vse narejenosti, laisser être, iskanje avtentičnega stanja v konkretnem tukaj in zdaj, brez igre, osvobojeno vseh navad ali sociokulturnih tikov. Iskanje najbolj naravne prezence. Medtem pa Pomra vzpostavi analogijo med prezenco, la présence, in sedanjikom, aktualnim trenutkom, le présent. Citiram: o igralcu pravimo, da ima prezenco. Jaz pravim, od trenutka, ko igralec dela na sedanjiku, ima prezenco. Sedanjik je zaporedje trenutkov. Trenutek je neka stvar in, že takoj, smrt te stvari. Velik igralec dela na diskontinuiranosti. Opisani princip ustvarjanja torej temelji na skupnem raziskovalnem delu, vendar pri tem ne gre, kot bi utegnili pomisliti, za kolektivno avtorstvo. Četudi je igralcem zaradi vpliva, ki ga imajo, svojo interpretacijo besedilnih delov na način podajanja dramskih oseb, situacij in dialogov mestoma legalno priznan soavtorski vložek, je umetniško vodstvo projektov ali tudi končno avtorsko odločanje vselej Pomrajevo. V njegovi značilni odrski estetiki, kateri prispevajo po Takelsu pisave različnih oblik, izstopajo pogosto izpraznjeni scenski prostori, ki so večkrat zasnovani glede na želeno vzpostavitev odnosa med odrom in avditorijem. Scenski prostor je na primer krožen ali bifrontalen in ki jih večji del izrazito opredeljuje tema, vnos svetlobe je zato toliko bolj odmerjen. Karakteristična je uporaba mikrofonov. Veliko pozornosti je namenjene tudi oblikovanju zvočne pokrajine. Vse to gradi kratke prizore in prispeva k uprizarjanju dramskih prepletov, sobivanj, vsakdanjega in nenavadnega, današnjega in preteklega, resničnega in imaginarnega, sanjskega ali tudi budnega in spečega. Besedilo, za nastanek katerega je bistvena njegova neločljiva povezanost z uprizoritvijo, pomra tako označi kot sled, ki jo pusti predstava na papirju. Vendar pri tem ne gre za material, ki ostane namenjen zgolj posamičnim strokovnim gledališkim obravnavam, temveč za knjižne izdaje, ki funkcionirajo tudi kot dramske predloge za uprizoritve drugih ustvarjalcev. Zato se pregledu in potrebnim dopolnitvam besedila za objavo pomra posveti po uprizoritvi. Nekoliko konkretneje bom spregovorila o leta 2015 nastalem delu 𝘀𝗀𝙙𝗀𝗏 in sicer iz dveh razlogov. Osebne gledalske izkušnje in obstoja izčrpnega dramaturškega pričevanja o procesu nastajanja dela v avtorstvu že omenjene Marion Boudier. Kot nakazuje naslov oziroma v naslovu omenjena figura, gre za tematizacijo francoske revolucije. Pomra v tem sledi avtorjem oziroma režiserjem, ki so se že lotevali njenih akterjev oziroma zgodovinskih letnic. V dramatiki je neobhoden Bihner, v gledališkem prizarjanju Arjan Muškin. A katere so specifične poteze tega Ludvikovega konca? Pomraju ne gre za rekonstrukcijo zgodovinskih dogodkov, temveč se zanima za njihovo idejno dinamiko in delo jo oblikuje na način posredovanja izostrenih predrevolucijskih oziroma revolucijskih misli v neposrednem tukaj in zdaj. Zato je tudi Ludvikovo ime ena redkih eksplicitnih zgodovinskih označitev. Brez znanih figur revolucije gledalec tako nima opore za orientacijo in je pozornost bolj direktno usmerjena k idejam, ki jih osebe izražajo. Poudarek je na manj znanih vidikih, ki jih predstavljajo burne izmenjave mnenj in nestrinjanja med revolucionarji. S tem in postopki, kot je fizično prehajanje igralcev med odrom in auditorijem, je občinstvo postavljeno v samo središče razprav. Dejanje torej vodi moč besede. Izhajanje iz konkretnega zgodovinskega časa dobi širšo razsežnost. Kot zanimivost, nekaj let po nastanku predstave je bila uprizoritvena snov primerjana z gibanjem rumenih jopičev. Kako izrazito lahko nagovarjajo izražene politične misli, priča denimo ena takšnih. Citiram. Ne vas spomnim, da je za naše dosežke zaslužena neposlušnost tega slabega ljudstva, ki ga danes obtožujete, njegova moč, energija, včasih tudi nasilnost kot odgovor na neko drugo nasilnost, policijsko nasilnost, socialno nasilnost, ki jo je občutilo leta in leta. Četudi je do navedenih besed vodilo obsežno raziskovanje zgodovinskih dokumentov, je Pomrajevo delo fikcija. Tako so z vidika nastanka besedila dragoceni podatki glede načina razvoja zgodbe, ki izhaja iz dogodkov od časa finančne krize leta 1787 do ironično oblikovanega sklepa Ludvikovega zaključka s frazo 𝘀𝗀𝗏 v času sprejemanja ustave. Boudier podrobno dokumentira ustvarjalni proces, iz katerega izpostavljam nekaj poudarkov. V začetnih fazah so igralci prejemali arhivska gradiva, na osnovi katerih so improvizirali. Izhajajoč iz pozicij, ki so jih zavzemali, denimo pozicija radikalne zahteve, so se postopoma izluščile osebe. Posamezne problematike, ki so bile v raziskovanem zgodovinskem času postranske, so postale v današnjem zelo aktualne, na primer onesnaženje. Improvizacije so nudile material tudi za druge prizore, ne zgolj izhodiščnika, nekatere vloge pa so bile določene šele v zaključni fazi procesa, ki je sledila Pomrajevemu avtorskemu pisanju. Vsak na svoj način prispeva k tekstu, z igro, s kostumi, z raziskovanjem, pojasnjuje Boudier postopek, ki sledi Pomrajevim napotkom. Paradoksalno bi ta način delovanja lahko imenovali, kot pravi Boudier, vodena soaktorialnost ali soaktorialnost pod vodstvom avtorja, v tem primeru avtorja režiserja, da bi ga ločili od procesov kolektivne pisave igralcev pod vodstvom ali brez vodstva režiserja. V primeru, kakršen je Pomrajev, pa so odločilni tudi produkcijski pogoji, ki omogočajo kompleksen in časovno precej dolg gledališki postopek. To se zdi bistveno poudariti pri poskusu detektiranja primerov, ki bi se mu v načinu delovanja približevali. A z vidika ustvarjanja, ki kaže strast do bogatih predpriprav pri oblikovanju gledaliških del z avtorskimi besedili, je v slovenskem prostoru to nedvomno režiser 𝘂𝗃𝗧𝗙𝗢𝗃. Kot avtor sicer deluje v različnih konstelacijah, predvsem v tandemu, in pri njegovem odrskem pisanju so prav tako ključni prispevki sodelavcev. Delovati v tem svetu, raziskovati in potem na umetniški način to predstaviti je zame najpomembnejše. Več glav, absolutno več ve in vse je v dobri ekipi. Mimo so časi, ko se je režiserja dojemalo kot osamljenega genija, je nedavno za časnik Večer opisal lastni način delovanja. Če se vrnem k uvodoma izpostavljenim spremembam v dramskem avtorstvu, se te potrjujejo tudi v Divjakovi samorefleksiji. Leta 2020 je v pogovoru o nominiranem besedilu za Grumovo nagrado z naslovom 7 dni v soavtorstvu s Katarino Morano spregovoril tudi o tem, kako se je razširil prostor poimenovanja dramskega besedila, torej ne več zgolj kot samotnega oziroma individualnega dela, temveč tudi kot posledico uprizoritvenega procesa. Hvala.
Thank you, Anna. And as the last presentation, in this installment, I have a pleasure to introduce to you Ms. Hanna Veselovska, the professor, theater critic, and a scholar from Kyiv, Ukraine. And we are joined by her right now at the moment. So, Ms. Veselovska, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation for this conference and my warm greeting from Kyiv. And I start my report. The dominant role of social networks is commonly recognized these days as a major factor of human life. The kind of impact the networks have in the most areas of our existence, from trade to politics, cannot be denied or undone. For example, one explanation as to why thousands of people in my country were able to get together so efficiently on Maidan in the Ukrainian capital during the 2014 revolution is related to the SMS phenomena. Text messages were sent out by those already present on Maidan to their relatives, friends, and despite the shutdown of public transport and blocked entrances to the capital, new flows of protesters continued to arrive. The SMS was serving as a kind of source signal and seems to work almost flawlessly. Another example, and unlike the first, even backed up the sociological research, is a huge role that Facebook must have played in Ukraine during the 2019 election, when the current president of Ukraine scored a stunning landslide victory in the race. Obviously, by the might of 2010's text from social networks or what preceded them, gained magical power over the addressee and were able to stimulate complex social and political process. It is hardly possible now to establish for sure who was the first to react to the phenomenon of social networks, theater or drama. But today, artistic adaptation of Facebook and other social media techniques are evident practically everywhere. Among playwrights with experience in documentary, I want to start share my presentation. With media technique are evident practically everywhere. Among playwrights with experience in the documentary theater, the magic of text from Facebook has been quickly perceived as a signal to master a new dramatic technique. At least, playwright began to collect Facebook text and complete something like a dog drama from there. This is, for example, how the play Diary of Maidan was born by its author Natalia Ворожбит, perhaps the most famous of all modern Ukrainian playwrights active on the scene. The performance was staged at the National Theatre, named after Ivan Franko in Kyiv and directed by Andrei Mai. It was also shown at several international theatre festivals. However, for obvious reasons, the main attention was drawn to the subject matter of the performances rather than the technique of creating of dramatic text, complete of Facebook posts from various Maidan protesters, something that became direct speech in the performance. Today, Natalia Ворожбит, you can see her returned to the method she tried for the creating dog drama throughout donor interviews. This is how she created her most famous play, Bad Roads, about the event in Donbass, which premiered in 2017 at the Royal Court Theatre in London. The play tells about people living in the war-torn Donbass, virtually on the line of the fire, and how they are forced to constantly pass checkpoint to visit their loved ones. Out of this play, and in the same 2018, came a resonant, harsh reality performance staged in Kyiv at the Left Bank Theatre. And you can see the pictures from these performances. And in addition, based on her play, Natalia Ворожбит herself made a fiction film, which is now officially nominated in Ukrainian for the next year's Oscar award. While Ворожбит has later stopped actively using material from social networks, the last decade has seen the phenomenon of social networks continuing the future prominently in the European drama. This occurs at the various levels, both structural or thematic or phenomenological ones. We have received a kind of Facebook drama composed like a message filled around an event to which the characters react. There was a special Facebook hero with several nicknames, multiplying himself depending on the situation and social circle. Social network as a phenomena of overwhelming real human communication have become a subject matter in dramatic text. This kind of plays can be found in the drama in various European countries. However, our attention is focused on the Ukrainian experience, which is quite natural. It is important to note that Facebook plays, as a rule, are associated with the acute traumatic experience, which, thanks to a conventional technique of taking from Facebook, maximize to intimacy of the issue. In sum, we can outline the two ways to organize the Facebook material, that is to build on its basis dramatic text and performance. In former case, there is a domination of certain general social or political issues which filters as it were throughout the characters. One such issue, particularly acute to Ukraine, is of course that is of the war in Donbass, because of which people leave their homes, break ties, and so on. We are talking about the case of two Donbass natives, Vitaly Chensky and Lena Legushonkova. Vitaly Chensky is native of the city of Mariupol on the Sea of Azov, from where he left for the capital Kyiv before the war, and Lena Legushonkova is originally from Lugansk, having left the city after it was taken under control by Russian-backed separatists. Both began their dramatic careers in 2017 and have recently become repertoire writers as well as in-demand screenwriters. The play Vitaly Kulis by Vitaly Chen-sky is a sarcastic story of a guy from provincial Mariupol who moved to Kyiv, composed as a dialogue with himself. A single hero actually splits here in two characters, each of which embodies a certain hypostasis of the authors, in fact, Vitaly Chen-sky himself. In various views, he tries to arrange his life in different ways and react differently to political events, as he reveals in Facebook. Two characters act as two nicknames of one hero who, hiding behind different Facebook names, writes about his impression in a foreign city, about political events that he does not understand and does not accept. As a result, in the play directed by Maxim Khalenko, we can see the interaction of two performers. Lena Legushonkova also used the principle of Facebook, creating a dramatic saga, Mother Not According to 𝘂𝗃𝗺𝗃𝗃, about her post-Soviet childhood in provincial Lugansk, where she still have many relatives. The title of the play contains irony and sarcasm directed against Maxim 𝘂𝗃𝗃, the pillar of Soviet drama, whose work from the perspective of social issue were considered exemplary. Therefore, the mother in Legushonkova play is an anti-hero. Her main feature are inertia, since this woman, so much like the playwright's real mother, is not capable to decisive action or in order to break out of the wretched backwater. Legushonkova plays is composed a series of her own Facebook posts filled with expressed indignation. In them, she reacts to the recklessness of her relatives, the demands of Soviet stereotypes, the habits of living miserably and acting on the orders from above. The play is written as a story from the first single person, but reception of Facebook post allowed Legushonkova to distance herself from the events that had taken place in her family. Her Facebook posts look like random notes of gradually maturing teenager and are not logically connected by a series of events. At the same time, the process of growing up and understanding who you and others are, as presented throughout Facebook revelations, make it possible to keep chronology. Here are the scattered reactions of a girl who with every move gains more and more of understanding and in the end knows a lot more about herself and the world than all adults around her. In a sense, such reaction proved a three-dimensional picture of degradation of an individual family and the entire industrial region. And the play Othello Facebook, this is another case of exploitation of their network, staged by director Tomaž Toporišič at the Golden Gate Theatre, is not only compositionally, but also visually similar to a social network page. To create it, the theatre did not even need a playwright, since it was made up of Facebook text from actors, participants in the play, who was actually representing themselves on the stage. In this case, the text of Shakespeare masterpieces was used only as one impulse for performance to recall and tell the audience about some annoying moments from their own life. The moments that stimulated them to take decisive action, good or bad. The real episodes that they recalled and then talked about on social networks were associated with one of the concepts behind the original Othello play, a feeling of being undeservedly hurt and angry towards a more successful rival. Everyone was choosing something of their own a story about the death of father who did not pay attention to his son, participation in the provincial beauty competition, or the first student party. Apparently made with a high degree of sincerity, the actors' recollection of their intimate monologues demonstrated the pain and ultimately the insignificance of all those grievances that had tormented them for years. What was a serious psychological problem for them is now overcome over the course of the game. Indeed, here in Othello Facebook, we have each of the actors representing both themselves and their attitude to own suffering, which he or she caricatures. In order for the viewer to understand that all this is happening in the world of Facebook, the actors are constantly changing their mask. Then even more suddenly they drop out of their roles, and as it suggests that audience should perceive the theater as a different system of coordinated, something where the images are illusory and real at the same time, almost like in a social networks. At the end of the day, such a collective revitalization of Facebook on the stage says a lot. Crucially, it seems to demonstrate how spontaneous personal emotions that overwhelm social network begin to rule the society as a whole, how they become so dominant a force and push many of its users towards social aggression. And in that way, all the collected personal mini stories become an occasion to talk not only about the hidden and implicit psychological problem of individual, but about the issue of manipulation in social networks. There is no opinion that today the principle of Facebook post as a way to organize dramatic material has exhausted itself. Those under 25 years of age tend to prefer such social networks as TikTok and Instagram, where there is no need to write anything, but you can easily get by with images, photos, pictures, memes, and yet even such non-text social networks may become a donor resource for contemporary drama and theater. Thank you for your attention.
Ms. Veselovska, greetings to Kiev, but don't go away. There might be questions for you. I'm opening the floor for the questions, if there are any, please.
She didn't hear you because it has to be unmuted.
Thank you, Mrs. Veselovska. Now the discussion is open. Just to to try to start off this debate, a question for Blaž Lukan. I found it really interesting, this your analysis of Varja Hrvatin's work. And it's interesting in my view that it's a mix of different approaches. For on one hand, the post-drama are no longer dramatic text. On the other hand, this écriture automatique that stems from modernist. You said it's not a modernist way, but how do you see it? It's what this modernism comes back in a different, and at the same time, as you said, it is still capable of commenting on the context, on the world, the situation of the author.
No, quite simple. As I wrote, she radicalizes all these approaches. Some of these approaches she knows. She I don't know. She lives in, you know, like modernism, post-drama, and so on. So, but the logic is somehow different. Not anymore. Not this automatism, surrealistic automatism anymore, but the logic of maybe this digital world. So maybe nothing new, but completely new.
Yeah, with a new mixture. The mixture is there. Thank you. Any more questions?
No. Ms. Veselovska. Hello, do you hear me? Yeah? Hello? Yeah. Okay, my question would be if you could be so kind to elaborate more on the term that perhaps I heard well, the Facebook theater. Does it exist already as a term? And if so, what does it entail? What does it consist of? Or what does it describe?
This is a question for me, I understand. Yes, because I hear very, very bad.
I was wondering whether you could describe a little bit more broadly the term Facebook theater. What does it actually entail? What does it describe?
As we say about the performances of Facebook, they describe the different kind of existence of people in the network. This is one sort of existence, and the second sort of existence in the real. And in these performances, director combine these two existence and these two kind of existence. And for instance, he demonstrate the real emotion of one person. There's a story about dying of his father, real emotion and the fiction emotion in Facebook, and combine this is in his performances. And for me, it is very important because our life, it's some sort of combine. It's some sort of combine of fake and a real emotion. A few words.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you very much.
I have a question for Tomaž, because I think more or less we wrote the same thing, or we were on the same track, if not. And I was wondering while I was listening everybody, but especially you, is it possible that the playwrights, got this idea of post-dramatic theater and decided to change their writing and started to write some kind of post-theater drama, something like that? Are they conscious of that, or they continue their own logic, their own path?
I think it depends on the dramatist, but basically, I think they're conscious, of course, as the theater directors are conscious that especially it depends also on the circumstances of different countries. In Slovenia in the 90s, we have this lack of communication between drama and theater. Lado Krat was speaking about the new theater, which has fragmentary text and which cannot get to new, let us say, more like the futurist text, like synthesis, but not something that the Russian avant-garde produced, the whole evening plays. So I think that this basically changed, and now we have a new situation in which everything is possible, but this does not mean that we have a complete freedom. And in a way, of course, I think that the new playwrights, I would go to the thesis of 𝘂𝗃𝗄𝗃, which has a very nice thesis in his book, that the drama after crisis changed because it suddenly realized that it's no longer necessary for the theater. And the theater, I think it was the same process. The theater, I think part of the theater realized also that theater is not necessary for drama anymore. That's what you were talking about. So in this way, we have a new reality, which happened, I think, a few times within the history of theater and drama. And now I think we're in these phases, and I will see to what we're going to, in what reality we're going to end in this way.
Thank you very much. Am I on? Thank you. Thank you very much for this answer. Just a comment on this, that I have been sort of aware of that in terms of tragedy, because theory of tragedy has taken completely a life on its own, regardless of, what's happening on stage. And apparently this is the same has been happening to drama or any dramatic text. But to all the presenters in this afternoon session, I have a general question from Jure Gantar again. So whoever feels addressed and spoken to, please do answer. And the question is, what is the influence of the evolution of stage directions or secondary text in general on the crisis or drama/theater? Well, Jure tends to pose such questions, exactly. That we, right.
I don't know if we can answer it basically, but if you could rephrase just the first part of the question.
Yes. What is the influence of the evolution of stage directions or secondary text in general on the crisis or drama/theater?
Yeah, we have this multi-production of the secondary text. We have it in Biljana Srbljanović, we have it with Saraken, we have it with a lot of writers who make it impossible to stage their plays. And this way, I think it was what you were talking about, basic, and what we have been talking about for the whole day today, that basically because of the new drama, theater has, the direction in theater or the whole processes in theater have to change. In a way, drama made the changes in theater crucial, I think, yes. In this way, drama really has a strong influence on theater. For some time, like with Simona Semenić, the theater wanted just to say, oh, she does not exist, this writing does not exist, it's not interesting for the theater. But then they realized it is interesting and they can make something for themselves also, because it's very egoistic theater, as we all know. It pretends not to be, but it is, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Any other? Sorry, Jure corrected the question on the crisis of drama/theater. Well, I do apologize for sort of not having thought about that. Yeah, crisis of drama. And as far as I have understood so far, we have been all talking about how this different kinds of literary input in dramatic texts have actually merged, have actually crossed the migrated to put my cup of tea, so to speak, to it, migrated to the other side, and they amalgamated. They became, well, we can say something new, but my question would be whether this is really so. Okay, is there any... Yeah, Tomaž is going to say some more.
I remember that Jurek, he asks very intelligent questions. Yeah, so he was speaking before. He was asking about Beckett. Yeah, and in a way, what we see today, it's what Beckett did already. You know, and what the absurd drama did in its Beckett did almost all the possible change. And what Heiner Miller talks about, the text resisting theater. When he talks about this, he talks about his texts and about the way Bob Wilson staged his texts, and he staged them in a way that seemed to be impossible for up till the moment when he staged Hamlet Machine. And in this way, I think, yeah, and / drama, this is very complicated, Yuri, but I think it's a very, very good question.
All right. So with that, I think we should close this session. Thank you very much. And I think that 𝗀𝗺𝗺𝗁 says it's time for coffee. Break.
We need 10 minutes break, so we'll start at 5, a little bit late.